This is Cyber Defense Radio with your host and cybersecurity expert, Gary Miliefsky. Gary brings to you another globally recognized cybersecurity executive in the hot seat today.
I am honored to have back in the hot seat Adam Bennett, the founder and CEO of Red Piranha, found online at redpiranha.net. Very, very cool company, growing fast. We're going to learn about SASE pops, and it's kind of exciting, microsegmentation, NDR, and so much more from a leader at really consolidating cybersecurity and making it easy for large enterprises, government agencies, and managed service providers to add the extra S. Adam, welcome back to the hot seat.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
So first, let's just go way back to the beginning. What inspired you to invent the Crystal Eye platform, the single pane of glass that actually works for cybersecurity?
Yeah, frustration. Originally, I was, we saw the attack surface change, the threat actors change. We saw essentially more and more people becoming victims, and I wanted to scale myself. And then also, consolidating controls was a tricky business, right? You can have up to 100 different tool sets that you need to be doing to meet a decent security program. So I started unifying those. And the other thing that really, I suppose, frustrated me was the lack of visibility in networks, that lack of network detection, that lack of ability. So once, AV had been bypassed, or, we're trying to do an incident response, when you're going from an alert on an AV product and an endpoint, well, then I need to go to cloud and network. We didn't have the tool sets in place a lot of the time in customer environments. So I wanted to really consolidate that, and I wanted to be able to really increase the efficiencies around incident response, just because an initial hack happens, or an initial, vulnerable system gets popped, or a phishing, sort of attack vector sort of is in play. It doesn't mean there's loss and risk to a business at that point. The loss and risk really comes in after, and the lingering and the dwell time, as they say, for attackers in a network. That's when they really get a chance to get a foothold, pivot, lateral movement, and then exploit the organization, whether it be in ransomware or for espionage purposes.
That's brilliant. And you're not only able to detect and deter, but you've defended and defeated some of the worst ransomware and malware teams out there, haven't you?
Yeah, we have an active threat intelligence team. We were the first company in the APAC region to be invited and then accepted into the Cyber Threat Alliance based out of Washington. We're an active contributor upstream with that intelligence. That intelligence is included in our platform. That's another thing. If we look at how the threat intelligence game works in the industry, usually customers are buying feeds. Particularly large enterprises who have the budgets can afford those feeds, but smaller enterprises would often get left behind in this space, not having that visibility, and even mid-size. But the problem isn't really the feed. The data is quite available, and sometimes now, because the industry charges a bit for it, quite expensive. But it's like, you bought the feed, now what do? How do you get that, in your stack and get actionable outcome from that intelligence? And so by incorporating that into our platform and making that all inclusive as well in the licensing model, means our customers get that benefit, the visibility, and our SOC teams, our threat intelligence teams doing managed detection and response, get that capability when we're doing investigations with customers. And that gives us a lot of insight into what's happening. And to do that means we need to be participating in that, actively. So we're actively tracking threat actors. We're doing research and analysis in that. The kids love it. I love training them on it, and it's something that gets the young graduates excited too when you can bring them in. But they're not just looking at dashboards; they're doing active threat hunting in the wild. And even just recently, we released a report where we worked with law enforcement and shut down a group called the Sega Group, which was pretty much unknown to the world before this, and we'd actually tracked some threat actors down to actual individuals, potential real individuals, which caused the closing down of this ransomware group. So it's activities behind the scenes like that feeds into the platform and keeps our customers safe.
Now back to the SASE, the POP stuff, points of presence. You're going global. You're all over the globe now. What literally is it? Crystal Eye deployed at these points of presence. What is, and give us the acronyms: software, secure access, secure edge. Like, what does that really mean to end users or to clients?
Yeah, it's about meeting sort of flexibility operationally for organizations. We've got customers that are in 20 countries, for example. We're getting more and more inquiries from outside of Australia too these days. We now have customers on every continent. So we needed to, one, as the customer networks and operations became, I suppose, more disparate and larger, we need to have operational flexibility as well for that. The secure edge, keeping it simple with two letters, I guess. Secure edge is really, we've got a couple of dozen POPs around the world now on just about every country. That allows us now to service every country that requires a cloud instance in that sense. We've got new cloud partnerships coming out all the time as well. But it allows us to be flexible in our deployment. We talk about it more in senses while we've got multiple controls on the platform, often an individual deployment of the platform might be deployed for a specific purpose. So one might be deployed to do the TDIR on one network segment and run vulnerability assessments. Another one might be run in another part of the segment, but also connect into the Office 365 environment, or run the Defender policies and things like that. So we have this really came about, one, to service customers globally, yes, because we have more inquiries coming. Two, also to meet the demand and flexibility of larger clients who essentially, like I said, had larger networks and a need. And it also, there's been a lot of problems with VPNs, I suppose, over the last 2 years. We worked really hard, to bring in a lot of support for WireGuard. And now we have SSO, Entra, sort of working in with WireGuard, so customers can now actually link WireGuard in with single sign-on with Entra AD, and we're getting near line speeds on that with customers around the world. So having those points of presence closer to users in cities, for example, means they can then have a secure connection in. We want to get rid of customers using RDP, for example. This is a better alternative, but we see a massive increase in speed and better security outcomes by switching to a newer protocol with a lower code base.
Yeah, and you've got to be right all the time. Bad guys only have to be right once. So the faster and the closer to where the traffic and the problems are happening, the quicker you can segment or micro-segment the problem. Speaking of micro-segmentation, there's no Secure Code 101 course yet in computer science. So we've got a lot of DevOps writing a lot of code in a lot of large enterprises, government agencies, everywhere. And they want to go faster. They want to write the code faster, deploy faster. Some of them are using AI to help them. There's some new tools out there. Doesn't that open back doors and vulnerabilities that companies haven't really thought about?
Yeah, it does. And I suppose the problem in what's been happening as well is due to this need for speed, as you're talking about. It's about, infrastructure teams are going to pass the baton, I suppose, of that asset creation and that asset manage over to programming teams, DevOps teams, and engineers. Now, their very focus is about being agile and getting products up from being, prototypes into production really quickly. And this has often, left a bit of a gap in oversight and a lack of governance, I suppose, in the management. And infrastructure teams have passed the baton and found it very difficult to continue managing those and taking ownership of those. We had customers with a problem there. They wanted to be able to, manage microservices or micro assets, Docker and container environments. So we brought policy management into Crystal Eye as well for that purpose. It's being in the single platform too. It automatically links in with our, TDIR, our threat detection incident response capability. So it's plug and play. And this is another boon, another major cost saving and effort saving. It just works. You set the policies up. You can give control back to infrastructure teams. So you're not reducing any speed or putting roadblocks in for DevOps teams. They still have access to the realm and they can spin up assets and play internally all day long. You now have control of that realm, micro-segmented control as an infrastructure manager. And when they're ready to go to production, you now have governance to then put the policy in place. And then once that's done, you have immediate detection capability. So it solves a lot of problems. again, this came out of a customer needs, customers that we were servicing having this need, even our own need with our own product. We were seeing, one IP and one server have up to 150 different systems and assets at the bottom of that. And of course, without that micro segmentation, we lose control over that, essentially. So it's a new part of the platform that comes out in this release, 5.5 we're releasing now, and it's called DAS, a Declarative Authorization Service. And again, the bit that I like is by bringing that policy enforcement in the platform, we get immediate uplift in our detection capability and a massive amount of detection coverage. So it's an exciting part. We also uplifted in line with that and servicing those type of customers. Our vulnerability management now also links straight in with that in the platform as well. So you can do Docker and container, run S-bombs and get vulnerability management, not just large infrastructure scans from the vulnerability management features as well. So again, that leads into our managed detection and response, because if we can see where vulnerabilities lie within that network while we're also monitoring things, we get a better feel for where attackers might go, and what's happening there. So, and attackers can often leave backdoors this way as well. So vulnerability management can also aid in that. But we also get major uplifts in that asset management. One of the new things we're working on is that CMDB or asset management as a service. Traditionally, we've just seen even large companies with good budgets really struggle to do asset management well, particularly when we start talking about microservices and containers and Kubernetes and other things. So we need to start looking at not just laptops and servers, but also the software bill of materials as well on those assets. And so we've unified that, and having those parts of the platform grow with that customer need has allowed us to work down that road as well and really make large advances that I hadn't seen in the industry in asset management for customers at the same time.
That's amazing. Adam, a lot of folks are used to advances in back to users, the endpoint, EDR, endpoint detection and response technology. What is NDR and what are you doing in that space?
Yeah, we've stayed away from the EDR. While we do have some endpoint protection products, they're really more around the attack surface management, the VPN or SD-WAN, and around our digital sort of incident response components. There's plenty of good EDR products out there. They do a job. They're all very similar. You've also got direct integration with Defender. We also take third-party EDR into our platform as well for correlation during the MDR service. But when we get a breach, when we get an indicator in a network, if I get an indicator from an endpoint, I now can't trust that endpoint. That's as simple as that. But I need to do correlation back on the network and then back in the cloud to see really what's happening. So we've built the platform really around that. We have NDR or TDIR, which is just taking NDR, has the incident response capability in there as well. And we're in the control plane. We see a lot of NDR pitch these days, really just log aggregators. They're taking logs, doing aggregation, and essentially trying to analyze network traffic off third-party products. We don't need a third-party product. We have up to 6, sometimes 10 times more visibility in a network traffic analysis from some of our other competitors, and a similar in the same type of class, you might say. But this gives us other benefits. While there is a resource overhead to that, being able to analyze traffic like we do, and we have, for instance, an IDPS up to 70,000 managed, or 70,000 plus managed rule sets and rules with our customers. Again, from our threat hunting capabilities pushed in, we're checking for things like lateral movement and pivoting, SMB, and activity that really makes a difference. But we're able to, again, correlate between endpoint, network, and cloud. And that's a really important thing, because just because you get an initial attack in an environment does not at that point mean you have loss and risk. It's the dwell time, the lingering, the pivoting, the ability for attackers to get a foothold within a network and then exploit some sort of outcome, whether it be espionage or ransomware, where the loss and the risk really comes. I mean, it's a bit of a crime, I think. You look at the breaches over just the last 10 months, how many of them have major exfiltration. You're talking about multiple gigs, sometimes a terabyte worth of data being exfiltrated from a network environment. How is that happening? It's happening because you don't have a good NDR program. By having a great NDR program, good architecture, you will pick this up immediately and be able to shut it down. If you're in the control plane, you can actually then shut this down, contain this at the same time, which is, that's where the loss and the risk and the pain is coming from, right? The exfiltration of data. If you're not in the control plane, it then becomes a little bit, there's more steps. And we call that moving target defense. While we're a bit hesitant to automate all of those, those network changes, it doesn't allow for human, machine teaming to be very efficient in how we manage that and shut attacks down quickly, respond to them quickly, and even well before exfiltration begins, because we're trying to get through to the second stage as well, detect that lateral movement. And this is also prevalent in the rise. We've seen a lot more EDR bypass come back from a security standpoint. If you go back to 2015, if you ask the CEO of Sophos in 2015, who were the premier AV product at the time, endpoint AV product at the time, what sort of detection capability does AV currently have? He said 15%. If you asked the security engineer at the time, they would have said 5%. So we've seen a swing back over the years with investment back towards antivirus endpoints, sort of success, I guess, over the last decade. But over the last couple of years, we've seen that swing back towards the attackers, having a bit more success. And that's because the sophistication of ransomware gangs has increased. They've been in business now 10 years, so they've got up their skill level. We've also seen a massive rise, as we know, in geopolitical issues, which has caused espionage, APTs, advanced persistent threats, to be involved in espionage. And they have the skills and the persistence and the ability to deploy these more sophisticated style attacks, which are not just bypassing EDR on the host, but also evading through other attack methods as well.
So Adam, let me ask you 3 examples and see if your NDR solution will fit. One is the WannaCry lateral movement. Another one is a bank in Canada actually had some bad guys come in who were working for the cleaning company, and they plugged in a laptop into a VoIP phone port and got on the network, and they stole information. And people who are deploying APTs like Live Off the Land, Volt, Typhoon. I'm curious about each of those are kind of very different situations, but would your NDR help solve the problem with all 3? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, if we look at WannaCry and Eternal Blue, that was an exploit of the implementation of SMB. Volt, Typhoon. That's the MO of these type of sophisticated attacks. They, and that's kind of what I was talking about before, where just because somebody falls for a phishing attack on a host or a vulnerable system gets popped, doesn't mean you've lost much at that point in time, right? It is the pivoting and the lateral movement that we start to increase that risk and loss. And so what we need to be able to do is, if there is evasion of EDR or evasion of EDR, whether it be just by bypassing a host with EDR, because EDR can't be deployed on every host and often isn't, or they're using even more sophisticated attacks where they're actually bypassing the EDR specifically on a host, which is too sophisticated attack is rather trivial. We've seen malware out there at the moment that's detecting up to 27 different types of EDR and then bypassing them. And I mean, if I just talk about Australia, we're probably predominantly using about 3 or 4 main products. I mean, look at what happened when CrowdStrike had a glitch there. How much of the world was affected, about 30% of systems worldwide, which is a boon for their sales team, but not great, for the industry. So what we're seeing is a massive increase in that. And yes, detecting lateral movement is key, essentially, to them being able to shut down an attack, because attacks happen in multi-stages. And of course, if you can do that, you reduce the risk. It's very easy to clean up one laptop or one host rather than trying to actually dig in and find, 100 different systems or multiple systems and not knowing where the attackers are lying in wait. What we're trying to avoid is, of course, persistence of attackers in networks as well. So that's a major problem once attackers get persistent. So we've got a big program about detecting lateral movement. We've got machine learning in the platform for that as well. We have a massive threat detection rule sets as well, multiple rule sets aimed at detecting this. And this is the benefit of having NDR in the control plane. We're not reliant on a third-party product to give us data to analyze. We are the ones generating that data. And that's a really important point. It gives us also benefits where we are, what they call it, moving target defense, where on detection, we're able to, defend and contain within a network environment. While we stop short of fully automating that, while we could, it's a bit dangerous, obviously, to fully automate that. But we have what we call human machine teaming, where we have essentially enabling that with our team or other partner teams, where we can very quickly respond and use MTD to protect networks as well.
And your SOC as a service team, you guys are ISO certified in 724-365?
Yeah, we're 27001 series 9001 as well. We also work to what's called the Defence Industry Security program here in Australia. We actually work with a lot of defence contractors for defence specifically. So we actually look after them, and Defence trusts us to bring them up to that this program, as it's called, very similar to the US CMMC, which is pretty much the same thing. And I think actually the US modeled its CMMC off our DIS program here in Australia. I'm a big supporter of that. It's quite stringent, but it's probably one of the higher requirements, I suppose, compliance requirements that are around. And again, it's about securing the supply chain. But I think it sets a really high bar, but it's great also. We have a thing with our managed service provider partners as well. We call it the Partner Assurance Program, where we actually run the compliance program for the MSP. And while it's not a formal program per se, and there's been government talks around the world about regulating managed service providers because they are an attack vector and hold the keys of the kingdom to many customers. But what it does for the end customer, by a partner working with us, is we obviously can say in an assurance letter here and almost certify that MSP for the end customer that they get assurance that that MSP is doing the right thing. They've got good governance. There's the checks and balances. And I suppose that's the problem that we see with a lot of MSPs doing security now alone. If they're auditing their own homework, the end client's not really getting any governance or assurance at that level. So by working in a true partnership here, pen tests or governance is separated. The partner then is also secure as well, which is a big thing, right? There's a lot of disparity between good and bad operators in the managed service provider world, right? So we try to make it easier for a end customer to trust in that whole ecosystem. And it works great for the MSP partners as well, because they're able to, where there's been friction in the past of trying to get systems updated or trying to get, buy-in from an end customer about spend. Obviously end customers can sit there and go, well, you're just trying to get me to spend more money. But if you've got a third party working with you saying, no, these are the risks, if you don't spend or upgrade these things, it gives the MSP a tool as well with our voice and our sort of partnership, so that the end customer has, I suppose, trust in that upspend as well. So it works. It's a bit of a two-way street. We've seen partners get a lot of benefit being able to sell security this way, because while we'll still be independent in providing the specialized security services, there's a lot of activity, IT activity that the MSP needs to do that's relative to security, if that makes sense. So there's a lot more billable hours as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Adam, I'm just curious, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Not at this point, mate. It's great to see you again. Hope everyone has fun at RSA, and look forward to seeing everybody next year.
Same here. Adam Bennett, you're the founder and CEO of Red Piranha, found online at redpiranha.net. Folks, if you're an MSP and you want to add one extra S, make more money, and add cyber resiliency to your portfolio with an incredible platform, a single pane of glass, or your large enterprise or government agency, go to redpiranha.net today.
You've been listening to Cyber Defense Radio. Stay tuned next time for another amazing and informative episode. CyberDefenseRadio.com is proudly part of the Cyber Defense Media Group, where InfoSec knowledge is power.
Cyber Defense TV and Cyber Defense Radio have launched 24/7 by 365 live streams. Visit them online today at cyberdefense.tv and cyberdefense.radio with your host and globally recognized cybersecurity expert and my good friend, Gary Miliefsky.